It may seem controversial, but if you feel as though being stuck as being a lawyer for your entire life is not what you want, don't worry, you are not the first person to feel that way. Other than to talk to someone like me, where I've been a lawyer for most of my life, it might be better to talk to someone like you, Shulin, who has perspectives that goes just beyond a law firm.
Hi, I'm Shulin, and welcome to After the Bar. This is a podcast where I speak to all sorts of lawyers, past, present, and future, who can share with us their wisdom, their insights, and their expertise, so we can be a little bit more equipped in different situations in life. Today, we have Jean Woo. So Jean is a banking specialist lawyer. She heads up the Singapore office of a global law firm, Ashurst. She's worked in UK as well as in Singapore. And today, let's find out whether there's a difference between a Singaporean homegrown lawyer and a foreign expat lawyer. Also, how is it really like managing this next new generation of lawyers from Gen Z? Welcome, Jean.
Hi, Shirley. Thank you very much for the glowing introduction. Very, very happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. And congrats on making Managing Partner a year ago. And I'm just going to dive right in because I have a lot of questions for you.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So some say that millennial lawyers are entitled and they lack work ethic. And apparently Gen Z is even worse. So I'm curious, how has your experience been like working with this new generation of lawyers?
For me, actually, on the contrary, it has been superbly positive. I think I had this many discussions about this attitude or poor attitude, and actually it hasn't been the case for me, more because of what we're looking for. So maybe to put things in a context, because we are an international law firm, I would say that sometimes you're trying to find the one out of maybe 100, 1,000. We don't hire a lot. So every time we go out in the market, if we find someone, it's great. If we don't find someone, we wait for another year. And we very much think of this as an apprenticeship. So you do want to find someone and then develop the person across the next few years. My experience in hiring in Singapore, especially for the younger generation, has actually been amazing. A couple of the lawyers or the people that come through the system can seem to know anything. They seem to be more matured, more well-equipped. And there are many times when I looked at a number of the young lawyers we've hired, I wished I was actually like that. I would actually quite candidly say that a number of them who have gone through our system I feel miles ahead of me when I was at that stage, primarily because I don't think we are hiring for the masses. We are actually just hiring, hopefully we can find one who's willing to go the distance with us. So it has been, just in brief, quite amazingly positive.
Wow, okay. So it seems like your firm and you have your hiring process filtered down to a certain level of precision. So you can find that one out of 100 or even 1,000 lawyers.
Yes, I find it's what we call a self-selecting process. I feel that it's never, I feel it's always about matching expectations. You tell whoever you wish to hire what you offer, and then whether the person's willing to go to the distance. I think the difficulty in maybe Gen Z or if you are actually offering something that's not consistent with what they originally offered or what they originally wanted, and then they feel let down by either the process or the expectation, and that's the part where I feel that the marriage doesn't take place. So for example, when lawyers come on board or interview with us, I don't think we will ever say, don't worry, this will be a breeze. Every day you come in, decide whether you want coffee or, you want to do something else, it's fine. You want to do this department, it's okay. You want to go to the next department, it's all right. Free choice, free will. The sky is blue. It's how high you reach. I think there's always very specific expectations. But I think one thing which is why I go back to the apprenticeship thing is we always tell them, we feel as though we're looking for someone who's going to go the distance with us. We'll give you the sort of training, stick with us, because I feel that in the initial few years it'll be tough, but in the long run, you feel that still you acquire skills beyond what you feel your peers will be able to garner. And I think people, I mean, they are so smart. I mean, these days they get smarter and smarter. They understand, they have the expectation as well. And so I think it has been by far, hopefully, quite a reasonably happy process and marriage so far.
Okay, and that's unusual to hear. So kudos to your hiring process. So it sounds like you managed the expectations right from the start. And once you have hired these younger lawyers, how do you ensure that this new generation of lawyers, they remain engaged and motivated at work?
I think it's to offer them something beyond what they see. So perspective, because we are an international law firm, I feel that sometimes if you show them the possibilities of a platform very, very much beyond Singapore, we've got 25 offices, so many in Asia, so big in Australia, so big in London. We also have a US presence. And then when you offer them work that goes way beyond the current jurisdictions. Today, they can be working for a partner in Singapore, tomorrow Australian, next day Hong Kong, China. That's very consistent, very usual for an international platform. I think the key word here is trying to engage them. I think for us, I find that from Singapore, lawyers are very good work-wise. So if you give them a piece of work, they do it to a very high degree, high level. But then we say, like, look, beyond that, there are soft skills development, which we are very, very keen. And actually the ethos of our firm, international firm, very grounded towards engaging them. When you say pro bono, you don't have to teach us pro bono. It's very much within our DNA. We look beyond yourself, social skills, you have issues, mental health is a key problem for us. We would like to talk to you. And also business development. It's not about looking at the person and say, bring in work when you're as young as possible. It really, really isn't like that. It's about just talking to them and saying that you've got to acquire skills beyond just book level. Talk to us, learn to talk properly, smile when you talk, present more, engage with people, come back to the office, talk to people, and then very sort of soft skills development from that perspective. And I feel that so they engage very well. And if they don't believe in it, again, I go back to it's a self-selecting process. Maybe something in life is better for you, but by and large, there are a crop of lawyers, young lawyers, Gen Z or otherwise, who are really keen to go the distance.
So Jean, you mentioned mental health earlier in your answer. So what does that entail? So does that mean like offering free therapy, or how do you all support your associates?
I feel that mental health is something which people should feel safe to talk about. I think it's maybe generational, or what we want to avoid is the situation that people don't feel safe to say that they feel as though they have worries, concerns, that they're unable to keep up at this pace, or fear of actually talking about it is something that should not be the case in any organization. So the first part is being able to express and describe that you are in trouble, or you are troubled, or you feel as though you need help to do better. So that engagement requires teaching not with the person, but at the organization at the senior level. Then that's just the infrastructure. Then what we have, we should, when we look very closely at, is therapists, psychologists. Talk to them. I really think that people, it's not a stigma by any means. If you feel as though the world is going so fast, but you want to talk to someone about it, you feel that psychologists, therapists, something like that is an avenue for you. Yes, we do highly encourage. In fact, Shirley and I would say that usually sometimes we may push people to talk to you as well, because I think it may seem controversial, but if you feel as though being stuck as being a lawyer for your entire life is not what you want, don't worry, you are not the first person to feel that way. And find sometimes, other than to talk to someone like me, where I've been a lawyer for most of my life, it might be better to talk to someone like you, Shulin, who has perspective that goes just beyond
Yes.
a law firm.
Yes.
So there are just avenues like this, which I think has always been very helpful.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Thank you, Jean. And also, it's great that you keep such an open mind, because at the end of the day, it comes down to culture. To create that environment where people don't feel judged if they need to see a therapist or a psychologist. I see a therapist quite regularly, and when I first started, I was afraid to tell people because I feel like I'm also judging myself. Oh, is there actually something wrong with me? But it helps me be a healthier person overall. It's not just about physical health. So thanks for sharing that.
I know.
So talking about engagement of lawyers, there are two, I would say, pull factors, opposing ends. So one is the clients who want their work done yesterday. And then there are the lawyers who, they need like maybe 7 hours of sleep or at least 5 or 6. So, how do we manage that? Because there's an increasing demand for work-life balance, especially in the legal industry. How do you deal with the two competing demands?
I feel that I am the sort of person that needs 6 hours of sleep at least every single day before I function. And I don't expect, it's actually tough for myself to not go to sleep for continuously or more than one night. And I don't expect that to occur with people who work for me or much broadly. I think we constantly suffer from the fact that it's the demands. If we could actually look ahead and we could gauge, yes, we'll get X amount of work, and so we will make sure that you're properly staffed. But the problems only ensue when we are unable to do that. So I think where I ask young lawyers is maybe just to have a bit of faith and trust in who you're working for or the organization. In fairness, if you look at this organization and you're working like a dog and the person thinks that that's the expectation and that's great and feel as though that will make you a stronger person, then if you feel as though that's not what you want, then it's okay to step out of the game. But if it's more the case where I feel sometimes I'm deeply apologetic if I have to really put through people through consistent work and they can't breathe, I try to say it's this period, after that let's take a downtime, then ratchet up again. Learn to maybe trust or understand your organization and who you work for, and make decisions after a while, whether that's the environment you would like to stay in or step out of.
So Jean, when we caught up, you shared that you actually volunteered to be the managing partner. And in your words, you said it's actually very un-Asian-like, to put yourself up for a leadership position. So what prompted you to put your hand up?
It's to learn more and to gain a better vantage or perspective in life. I always felt that when you come to a certain age in life, people keep telling you, oh, you must constantly, I don't know, it's like a government thing, right? Use all your credits to make sure you learn a new skill in life. I did think of, being like electrician course or something like that. But in realistically, when you go to learn your technical skill, then the next thing you should learn is to gain a better vantage point. And what I mean by that is to maybe step up further in your position or volunteer to step up further so that you can see both sides of the coin better. It's a bit like in a battle, right? Every time you see a battle, you understand, you kind of fail to understand why the organization keeps asking you to do certain things, and you can never see beyond just a few people in front of you. And say, stop putting so much pressure on me to work harder, to build, and to go after this client. Why are you doing this? Like every time this time of the year, you're making me do so much of this.
Yeah.
But when you step maybe a bit higher and run your own business, you realize that cash flows, there's certain things that need to be done way in advance so that 3 months later we are in a good position to pay people bonus, salaries, make people happy. So when you gain that better vantage point, then it makes you a better person, I feel as well. And then if you ever felt as though you really wanted to go beyond yourself, say you want to help someone, you cannot help someone from a position where you are not able. So if you can't help yourself and you don't have skill and you're unable to influence other people, you can't even talk to influence people to listen to you, then you can't even help other people. But if you maybe gain a better vantage point, volunteer for a role, try to do it better, manage something, and people will say, actually, she knows what she's doing, then maybe when you come to that part in time in your life, you can help others, or, set things in the right direction, which you feel you want to. So I think that's essentially why I put my hand up.
Wow. And actually, it's interesting you say this because until you've done your boss's job, you don't know how difficult it was for your boss, how decisions are made at the top. So now that you have this vantage point, you have a bird's eye view, how have you changed your perspective?
Actually, the funny thing in life is I always had my view of how I wanted things done ever since I was, for many years. So it's all about now that maybe I'm an emerging partner, keeping to that path and growing it and putting in effort. So to give you an example, I always wanted the firm the office to expand in a certain way. I never feel I am the end all and be all. I don't feel that if the firm ended up with me being the sole banking partner or the sole partner in 10 miles left and right, that is success. I am happy. I got a big bungalow. That is not success by any measure. So I always looked around and I knew that to be successful and to be good, you need to be in a company of people like yourself. No one is an island, truly enough. That if you want to be successful, your lieutenants must be successful. People around you must be great, wonderful, capable. You look at the person and say, hey, you think that he's great, but look at the person who's working. My God, they are actually fantastic. And the fantastic person is willing to work for that person. I think that is amazing. And that is, in my opinion, success. So I've always wanted to work towards an ability to say, let's grow in here and let's grow in there, which is why I took this role as well.
Well, I really admire that because it's a very evolved mindset to say, I'm not territorial. So meaning you're quite secure, you're very secure, you feel secure in where you are. That's why you can hire other people. You don't feel like the pie will shrink for you, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so making that transition from a regular partner in a law firm to now the head of the Singapore office managing partner, are these two competing demands? Because you have to look at the best interest of the law firm at large, but you also need to maintain your successful legal practice, your own banking practice. How do you go about juggling these two?
Actually, I must confess my practice is very important to me because it helps. Like I think if you tell me what made me confident that I could do the role, it's always that I felt that I had very competent people working for me. And I always thought that, that the practice to have a very good, neat garden is very important for someone who wants to go beyond just an immediate practice. So with that focus in mind, that's often how I, in a way, prioritize. I always make sure that my 9 to 5, it's not really 9 to 5, but my 9 to 5 job in terms of my practice is stable. That actually overrides a number of things. But I think because I've got such a good team, I'm able to spare, or be very efficient in helping and doing other things. And then that's what's helped me. I mean, if I came here and said, no, everything is important in life, both are equal, then I don't think I'm being very upfront and about this question. And if you ask me which way around I focus on every single day, I focus on practice. I think about the top 3 things that I really needed to do to help the clients and get them across the line. Then further out, there were a couple of things I always feel management-wise I needed to do. But the good thing is, with experience, I always knew that the thing in management is if you don't do it early, it comes to bite you. So the things in management, some may be urgent, but things are rolling. So I have to address it when I have to address it. So it's about being very organized and efficient as well. And that's how you can do both.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And looking back over the last 1 year, because you're a relatively new managing partner, is there anything you might have done differently now knowing what you know?
Oh yes, I've made so many mistakes in my life. If that's where the question is even before and after I made, it's not. I think the very important thing in life, if you look at I wouldn't say successful, like people in life, and you go, it's very hard to walk away from saying that you've never made a mistake. But the more important thing is the recovery. So I've done so many things, but I looked back and I thought I wouldn't have done that if I had the chance to do it again. But I think I gained something by doing it, and I realized, and it was a learning curve for me. And I would say categorically, whenever I sort of looked at this and I thought that, I should have done it better, you could be really certain that I would definitely not repeat that mistake again. So I guess that from a perspective, it's more knowing that you always make mistakes, but you have to learn really quickly from it. That makes you a better person.
Okay. And to the people who are out there listening and maybe they are going to step into a management role, is there any advice you would give them? Something you wish someone had told you right at the start?
I think it's more personality. You've got to, it's a role where it's never easy. And it's like the US presidency. Obama, you will only be 50.1% popular. And you start with that level, and it's a downhill task for them. So even if you are the most popular president or prime minister, you started off with a level of popularity at a certain level, assume that you will drop to just above passing mark at the end of your term. And then you must accept that. It is not something where you think, it is there to garner support. So it's actually just the simple thing is you got a lot of shit thrown on your way, and just assume that your level of popularity will always start to falter the moment you start doing the role.
Yes. And to do the role effectively, it means that you have to learn to say no and be comfortable when other people are not happy with certain decisions made.
True. I actually been quite lucky. I find that maybe in this path or journey in life, I had a lot of help. So I don't feel that it's very I'm autocratic, or it's certainly not that powerful. But along the way, it's all trying to be more discerning. As you walk along this path, you realize that you realize people's personality. There have been people who have surprised me, come forward, organized, did things. I was like, my God, I didn't know that you had that capability. But along the way, you sort of discern people's personality as well. So as I say, yes, true, it's a learning process. But as you go and aim towards what you want to achieve, don't be surprised. I think it's again self-selecting. People will come through and go, this person is quite good. I really want to lean more on this person and get help. Or this person, no, I just don't think, how many times, and we're still in the same position, drop it. So it's just being more clear, crisp about which path decisions you have to pay. The worst thing in life, I guess, for me when I sort of do this is people who can't make up their minds. They don't know which way they want to go. And then 6 months down the road, you're still looking at them and it's still the same position. So I think in life, you will make mistakes, but then make a decision and go forth.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So to summarize, I guess being in management, you need to surround yourself with brilliant people. It could be the one or out of 100 or 1,000 people. And I guess having that perspective and that vantage point gives you an advantage, actually, to be more efficient overall.
Be always happy that you have people smarter than you.
Yes.
It's very, very important in life. And I would say Gen Zs, now a number of them are really smart.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of access to so many things more than what we ever had when we were young, right, Shulin?
Yes.
And you can imagine the ones that are able to master the studies, have a better perspective. Really happy when I look at people around me. I think a lot of them smarter, better. That then you feel really happy from that perspective.
Wow. Yeah. So Jean, we're going to move on to the next topic, which is slightly polarizing. Everyone will have different views. It's a bit sensitive. It's about Singaporean lawyers versus, I'm not going to pit them against each other, but just the differences, the nuances between Singaporean lawyers and expat lawyers. Because you're a Singaporean who's worked in the UK, studied in the UK, and then you've been working in Singapore for the past 10 over years. When you were working in the UK, did you feel like an outsider?
No. If anyone's worked in London and worked in New York, I've not worked in New York, but I've worked in London for many years. Everyone is an outsider in London. Everyone is an outsider. When you go to London, I struggle to find anyone born and bred in London.
I see.
Within my team, 80% were not even English. Even though I was working for an international English firm, the nature of working in London, and I don't know, but I feel that New York is the same. It's really cosmopolitan. You would see Aussies, people from South Africa, so many Europeans there, people from the US. So you kind of feel that you feel the sense that it really is a melting pot. So I didn't feel an outsider in the sense that I didn't know what was an insider in London. Like there
Yes.
wasn't like, hey, I was born and bred in London. I came to work here. That person's probably overseas somewhere in other cities at the moment now.
So in Singapore, we have the reverse because we are quite insulated, very sheltered. So there are three categories of lawyers in my view. There are the Singaporean homegrown lawyers who have done their studies in NUS Law, SMU. So I fall in that category. I went to like a big four law firm in Singapore. Then you fall into the second category of Singaporean lawyers who have worked and studied overseas. Then the third bucket would be foreign expat lawyers. So in your view, is there an advantage that you have given that you're a Singaporean who's worked and studied overseas?
I think that's such a tricky question, right? Because I understand where this question is coming from. And I think the only way to answer this is also to be quite candid and upfront. Yes, you have an advantage, but I hope that no overseas lawyer feels as though, carries that thinking, I'm better because I have got that advantage. It's just circumstances in life. And I'm not saying it goes one way or another. I don't know whether you've seen this clip, but I saw this clip where they asked a bunch of kids to line up in the front of the line, and said, okay, those who went overseas step 10 steps, and there was a bunch of them that stepped 10 steps. Those who have parents who were working white collar jobs step another 10 steps, and they step another 10 steps. And those who actually were able to travel overseas whenever they had a holiday in the European countries, step another 10 steps, you step another 10 steps. Then they say, okay, then just run to the finishing line and see who gets there first. I think that there's always things in life where you have an advantage sometimes when you are able to go overseas and garner certain opportunities because of that, but those opportunities came about maybe partly through you, but maybe obviously not you, maybe through your family. Then you go through life in one way, but to feel like it's very important to remember two things. It's very important for anyone who had that advantage to come back and not feel that it's an advantage. And also equally, it's also very important for someone who's homegrown, not born here. It's very important to understand that the world is your oyster. Like to feel as though if you want to better yourself by going overseas to gain a better perspective, you can. It's up to you now because you are capable. Your ability is there to do that as well. So I think that's probably better way to look at both sets of talents.
Yep. I mean, I speak from obviously my perspective because I'm a Singaporean lawyer, ex-lawyer who worked and studied here, and I have the advantage of knowing lawyers from all walks of life, and I would say that there is an advantage if someone has worked overseas. And I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm a Singaporean. I could be a Malaysian or I could be a PRC Chinese, but if I've left the jurisdiction of my home jurisdiction to get a different perspective and come back, I add a different kind of dimension. So my next question is, Singaporean lawyers listening to this, let's say they want a different perspective and they want to join an international law firm. How can they gain that advantage for themselves? How can they get hired? Because I'm not saying that Singapore law firms are inferior. I came from one, the training is excellent. But let's say I want to have that exposure without leaving Singapore, then it makes sense to join an international firm. How can they do that? Because you just said your hiring criteria is so stringent, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000. So I'm just curious, what your view is on this.
I've seen a couple of routes being taken, and I highly encourage that as well. So there are certain periods in time where overseas law firms hire a lot. I know that I think post-COVID, towards the end of that 2020 year, U.S. law firms hired en masse, and then so leaving aside whether you want to go to work in Singapore for international law firm, you could take that route and just say, I would like to go overseas, US, UK, Australia, and put your hand up to it. Many have done this route as well. So think about it, do it and actively, look for that sort of opportunities. And if you are a good lawyer, yes, I've actually looked at a number of lawyers, and Singapore lawyers have that option in life for them. So that's one route. The other route is obviously the international law firm in Singapore. Yes, actually just apply for it. When I look at certain practices, so certain practices may be slightly challenging, but banking, M&A, the sort of the broad-based practices where actually we look at the people in the local law firms have got fantastic skill sets in those areas. We have never closed our doors to any of them. And then probably as well, we look actively for a good, competent lawyer that is willing to engage and self-improve. We certainly do actively hire from local law firms as well.
Yes, I've noticed that. And I guess there is this aspect where it shouldn't be a zero-sum game, because people listening to this might think, oh yeah, foreign lawyers are coming in to take our jobs. But my view is that there's so much we can learn from expat lawyers and vice versa. Have you seen that kind of exchange of information or like peer mentoring happen in your firm?
Yes, I think maybe the funny thing is to step back and realize that the legal sector in all countries is possibly one of the most conservative sectors. It's not open. So Singapore isn't different. So if you think that maybe we try to have certain protectionistic measures against international law firm, then hey, there are a lot in other jurisdictions, Hong Kong, Indonesia. So I understand why the government does this. They want to be international, but they want to be protectionistic as well. That's good. I think they should do that. Where unfortunately, because Singapore, our borders are so open, we cannot do that. It's very hard to continue to do that forever. So I do understand the pressures of the large local law firms where they lose talent quite a bit to the international law firms. But I guess when I step back and say look at your accounting firms, are you trying to tell me Ernst & Young, PwC, are they local? Are they international? Like which way around do you look at them from your lens? And I feel that maybe 5 years down the road, if you look at other jurisdictions, what's not to say when you look at one of the Magic Circle firms, you realize, hey, that's a really good Singapore law firm who is also a Magic Circle firm here in Singapore.
Yes.
So try to think of it, I think, more from that perspective would be my answer.
So Jean, that's an excellent analogy. So you're talking about the big four accounting firms, PwC, Ernst & Young, KPMG, and Deloitte. And interestingly, a lot of the partners in these big four audit firms in Singapore are Asian, Singaporeans. So are you saying that potentially we could go down that route where, the legal scene could be dominated by big international firms? I mean, it's very far from it now because we have the big four local law firms. So we're talking A&G, Drew & Napier, Raja & Tan, Wong P, right? So it's almost like, are we saying that potentially, because there's a lot of talk that maybe 10, 20 years down the road, the legal landscape in Singapore might look quite different?
Of course, I actually very much think that inevitably is like that. You just need to look no further than Hong Kong, where I think the international law firms are very localized, but they are international law firms. You wouldn't say any way around it. We are pretty much the legal sector, one of the last few slightly more conservative sectors in Singapore. It's very natural because Singaporeans go through the ranks, that when you look ahead, you look at these four big accounting firms, what's not to say that international law firm will look similar to them, have a very strong local nexus. I mean, feel free to say you disagree, but isn't that quite immediately the near future already? It's not even going to be a long-term future. It's going to be around the corner.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, it may sound threatening to someone who might be a local firm partner, equity and doing really well, to think about the future, which is actually not that far away and not too unrealistic to think that we might most likely head down the way of how Hong Kong has, in the way that, they only have, I think, one large local law firm, Deacons. Then the rest of them are international law firms, which are very localized.
Yes.
And that's something I want to talk about because it's actually I'm a proud Singaporean to see Singaporean partners do well on the global stage, such as yourself, actually. I think that's something worth celebrating.
I feel that there are a lot of Singaporeans like myself, not being very humble. It's actually it's very factual. If you look through international law firms, you go through a lot of Magic Circle firms, US law firms, there are a huge number of Singaporeans. And I don't mean just people who have managerial positions in Singapore. We have those in managerial positions, like for us in Ashes, all over the world, who are Singaporeans as well. And we look across and we see numerous examples of that. So I don't think that the reason why, back to your earlier question, I say that I really feel that that's just the next stage in life for the law firm evolution. For sure, that's going to come around in the next stage very soon.
And there has been a trend of local law firms merging or partnering or doing an FLA with global law firms to expand their reach. And some critics argue that this trend will lead to the loss of local legal talent. I don't agree. But the flip side is that locals are able to level up and join global law firms. But still, they have that local law firm, it's like two entities coming together. What's your take on this trend?
I feel that it's, I wouldn't say it's a loss of legal talent at all. I feel that's what the government has always wanted to do, find a correct ecosystem where we bring the best of the international law firms come in, and there's sort of knowledge transfer and give the opportunities to a lot of people, local lawyers here. And that's what you need to create, the right ecosystem for that to occur. And then always these FLAs, GLVs, which is, I guess, just for those people who are not listening, who are not legal, these are legal structures that enable international law firms to do Singapore law advice. But it's a means by which that sort of knowledge transfer can occur. I mean, we are doing it in Singapore. So it's not as though we're doing a GLV in Australia or Korea and we're transferring. There's no loss of legal talent. We're not transferring your talent to Australia. We are just trying to put them into international platform where I think their skills would be put to very, very good use.
Yep. So Jean, as you alluded to before, some significant moves have been made from local law firms to foreign law firms. And many years now, associates have moved from local firms to international firms. And that's like a common pain point for local law firm partners. But now we're seeing partners and teams move from local firms to international firms. What do you think attracts local firm partners to move to global firms?
That's a very tricky question, noting that maybe a lot of audience may listen to this and go like, oh no, why? I know, got to be really tightened on that sense. So I think that I always found two aspects of an international law firm that attracts a very good, competent local partner. I know I wouldn't like to say money. Let's leave money aside. I feel as though a local law firm can pay a partner very well. Don't get me wrong. There is transparency for one. So I think sometimes when you look at the structure in some of the firms, because of the nature they evolve, I don't think it's possible to feel like, I think that there tends to be a greater amount of the pie, say 80% of the pie given to maybe just 20% of the partners. I'm just pulling numbers off the air. I do not know. The RAM packages or the distribution's not clear from my perspective. But I think there's the transparency in an international law firm. So I can tell them categorically, anyone who comes an international law firm, I think that applies to a number of us, is the transparency in the remuneration of partners. So we are not different from other firms, but every year we know how much our global CEO earns and every single equity partner earns. That list is distributed and made clear to everybody. And it's, I would say it was never totally fair, but it is as fair if you say this is how we distributed the pie. And they have to be very clear how much our executive committee is earning. They cannot be very off the scope packages as well. It needs to be very transparent, which part of the ladder or the points are you on, and then it's distributed globally to all partners so that everyone looks at you and understands how much you earn. So the transparency is one aspect, which I think whenever I talk through appeals to a number of people, and that's the part. And also, really, it's meritocracy. There are opportunities out there, and because you're such a big international firm, it's not just Singapore. Your fate, although decided by a fewer people, there are many aspects of it. It's not that you feel as though it's decided by one or two, that there's actually a much bigger, broader process. There are KPIs because there's so many partners in the mix. So again, it goes back to we operate and try to institutionalize a lot of, even though we're a partnership, becomes more like a corporate. And whenever I talk through that with some people, partners, other law firms, it inherently appeals to them, that sort of structure. So I think that's probably the part that attracts them more to an international platform.
Yes. Actually, I heard recently from a local firm partner that their compensation scheme in one of the big firms is completely opaque. They have no idea, who decides what, and I've built X amount, but how come I'm only taking home this amount? So that is a very good point you mentioned. And I think there is this shared resources behind like a big law firm, a global law firm, where increasingly we see clients really they just want to plug into. And so if you have offices worldwide, obviously there is a very big advantage compared to if we are a local law firm without those resources. So I guess there are pros and cons. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about how you do it, because people listening to this are thinking, wow, you're a female Singaporean managing partner doing really well, and you have a 14-year-old son. You shared with me, yes, who's hopefully listening to this.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So how do you juggle? Because in all those years, you became a partner, you built your practice, and now you're a managing partner.
A lot of family help and support. I think it would be terrible to say that I did it all myself. So my mom, my in-laws, my husband, even all of us, quite a sensible kid as well. I think everyone is always very supportive and helped so much. I do feel that some of my faults are that when I have work to do and I focus on something, it's to the exclusion of everyone and anything else. And Ollie and Sean, my husband, knows as well that when I've got something to do, it's something that I'll sit down and to the total exclusion of everything else. I think they've been really, really understanding, and my family has been really understanding. So again, the simple answer is this: you can never be very successful without good family support, and I truly treasure it.
Yes. And recently when we were both on the panel for Law Society Women in Practice panel discussion, you shared with everyone that it's so important to get things settled at home in order to do work well.
Yes.
Is that a philosophy of yours?
Oh yes, I mean I feel that my priorities are also quite clear when it comes to family and work. It is actually family first. That answers the question of why I'm back in Singapore. Oliver had a sort of a medical condition when he was in London, so it was almost immediate. I had to leave and I had to come back to Singapore. If the situation arises again, it's very clear what my decision making process, what the decision tree would be. So that's definitely been the priority, and I think you have to go through in life to realize that family is more important. Then after that, then you look at how you can make your work life better and things like that. So it's definitely down to priorities and being very clear what it is.
So I'm going to ask this question for myself. How do you keep the priorities in check? Because I know that my family matters, but I'm like you, when I have something, it's to the exclusion of everything else. Like I have to zone in and, don't come and disturb me. But then how do we then be present? Do you have certain KPIs? Do you run it like a project? Because I set certain KPIs for myself, like, I must read, I must be at bedtime X number of times in a week. Are there any tips you can share?
I think the limits, I think I've always know what I can, I cannot do. So weekends are for family, weekdays, unfortunately, are devoted to work. It may sound terrible, but I think because I started in London and worked really, really, really hard. For those who are in that field, I was in a left in LBO, and it was like hours and hours. You'd sleep there. In London, the law firms occupy a building. There's actually rooms for you to sleep, sleeping pods, because it's too late for you to go home. And that's very common. There's a canteen to eat there. So I used to eat and sleep in the office in London, and that's very common for large international law firms. Ever since I was an associate or young lawyer, I never assumed that I would be able to go home from Monday to Friday to eat with my family, and I've never had. So it will only be maybe one day where I thought, God, this is a special occasion, someone's birthday, we've got to make it out for dinner. Of course, I do have time for that. I've never really, like, even for the last few years, sat down at dinner table with Oliver and Sean to eat dinner on the weekdays, and for that I apologize very deeply. That has never, and I think that's the expectation. Oliver never expects me at the dinner table, but then weekends would be for him, totally what they want to do. I think, unfortunately, it's not. If you looked at me and thought, oh, that's, some people say that's not what I want, it's not perfection. It's true, but I find that I've got to set those boundaries so that I am clear what I can finish during the weekday, so that I leave what I can. I leave it for them for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kudos to you for communicating those boundaries with your family members so they understand. Because I had to form certain boundaries. Otherwise, I was trying to do everything on weekdays, and then sometimes on the weekends I still work. So it's almost like 7 days a week. There's no, like, present time for the family, and that's actually worse in my view. So you're doing a great job. Yeah, you don't have to feel bad.
It's easy to ask me. Maybe you ask Sean and Oliver, then they'll have a different version.
I will catch up with Sean separately.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jean, before we wrap up the podcast, we like to go to the rapid fire round of questions.
Sure.
Okay, so what's your favorite legal drama or movie?
Can I say favorite movie? Because I don't watch legal dramas at all. I find it too painful. But my favorite movie is Shadowlands. It's a very generational thing. It was a movie which Anthony Hopkins acted it, I think maybe 20 years ago, about C.S. Lewis. For those, maybe my generation may recall that movie, but it's always been my all-time favorite movie.
Oh, nice. Okay, I must go check it out. So, best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice was someone who told me that if you're on your deathbed, no one ever wished they worked harder.
Well said. And if you weren't a lawyer, what would you be doing?
PE teacher. I liked sports a lot, and I was very, very, I was happy doing it. Studies was not my priority. So I've always wanted to be a PE teacher.
Wow, so what kind of sports do you used to do?
I used to do netball because of my height, and I enjoy it tremendously. I think a bit of it passed down to Oliver. He likes basketball a lot now. So every day I would wake up. I remember in school thinking, is this PE day? And PE day was always Tuesday and Thursday. It made me very happy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Sleeping.
What's your favorite mantra or quote you live by?
There shouldn't be a mantra and quote in life. Always be flexible and be willing to change.
Okay, and that's also a philosophy. Okay, if you could give one piece of advice to a new lawyer, what would it be?
Just be very open-minded and be hardworking and focused and determined. I think sometimes in life, because you are young, you've got so many options and you feel as though you want to run down many things, but at the end of the day, think of it, I feel like in our field, like it's saying, it's apprenticeship. Be focused, be determined, understand you've got to stick with it for some time before you're able to determine whether you can be successful with it. So I think that's probably my advice to most young lawyers.
That's very insightful. And the last question, what do you think of when you hear the word bar?
I think of an alcoholic joint, actually. I definitely don't think something more legal.
Okay,
so
and what's your favorite alcoholic drink?
My favorite alcoholic drink, gin and tonic.
Oh, nice. So thank you so much, Jean, for your time and being a guest on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite, Shirley. I enjoyed it.
So how can the listeners connect with you if they want to,
LinkedIn, Ashes Singapore website. I think that has my details.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, then be generous and share it with all of your friends. And if you're feeling extra generous, rate us 5 stars on Spotify, and follow me on LinkedIn. Be sure to tune in again to find out what is in store for us after the bar. Bye!